So, welcome everybody. I am Steph. I'm the founder of Clarity Web Design Studio based in Windsor, Nova Scotia. I help service-based founders build websites, rebuild often, websites that actually support their goals. And we try to do that without a lot of digital clutter and confusion or compromise. So a lot of the folks that I work with are women-led businesses that have been around for a while. We've grown, we've evolved, we've had many iterations of our websites, and our message is usually also growing and evolving as we go. And the website is often the last thing on the list, so it usually doesn't catch up very, very carefully. So that's where this conversation came from. So this is part of my monthly Roundtable series, which is all about supporting female founders. And so this conversation is about legacy content, which can often literally and figuratively weigh a website down. So strategically and, technically. So as things are shifting in the online world of like search behavior, we're talking a lot more about search experience optimization instead of just uh, search engine optimization and the rise of AI, blah, blah, blah. So people aren't just finding your site anymore the way that they used to. They're scanning, they're skimming, they're previewing. So that all means your content has to work a lot harder, but it also has to feel more human at the same time. So what I love about this roundtable is it's a chance to talk about how we make decisions around what to keep and what to cut, and how to build websites that are lighter and clearer and more aligned, hopefully, with the people that they're meant to serve. So joining me today, we've got Susan Engelhut and Beck Fazzolari. So Susan, why don't you give us a quick little intro about what you do, and then we'll hear from Beck.
Sure. I work with CEOs of B2B companies, and they can be 1 million to 50 million. And really what we're working at is they've usually reached a plateau where either they or their team don't have the real DNA that enables them to understand the way their buyers buy. And so I go in and work with them to teach them a common language and a way of thinking and a sales process, the way the buyers buy process. And actually, interestingly enough, that affects the content that they create because their sales process changes. Their content needs to change to reflect what their sales process is. So I'm looking forward to this.
Beautiful. Thank you, Susan. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. This is going to be great. Beck, would you like to do a little intro, please?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Beck Fazzolari. I'm a website strategy consultant. What that means is that I don't design or build websites, but I work with businesses to help them define, plan, and understand what their website needs are. So looking at goals, understanding audiences, and really getting into kind of the nitty-gritty of what you want your website to be before you embark on that work. My career began in content, so I'm really excited to have this conversation today from that perspective as well. Content is a huge piece of the puzzle of the work that I do today. So really looking forward to chatting. Yeah.
So Beck, what do you mean when you say you started out in content? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the first kind of 6-7 years of my career, I was in roles like digital content manager, content specialist, producer, that kind of thing. So I spent a lot of time writing, a lot of time interviewing, a lot of time kind of pulling together bits of information into content that was on brand, that was designed for specific audiences, and that had kind of a more of an evergreen or a timeless timeless approach to it.
Nice. Can I make a connection to that content? Or sorry, I don't want to.
I was just going to say this feels like something that Susan would be doing as well.
Yeah, so just two thoughts. Number one, Beck, you get the award for best accent for today. Number two, so number two is in one part of my life, I was a partner in the world's largest sales methodology firm. And I created a methodology, a curriculum, course, training, consulting curriculum for them because what they realized is that when they went into Fortune 50 companies and they sold sales training, they actually couldn't move the needle unless they changed also the way marketing changed, which would change the way content changes, right? So it's absolutely fundamental to have those two pieces together.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Okay, great. So thank you. So I'm really excited to have you both here. I think this is going to be a really good strategic chat for the folks that are able to join us. And thank you for everybody that is able to join us live. We had a number of folks who already indicated that they'll be watching the recording, so that's cool too. So as we go through, I've got a few questions that we're going to chit chat about here. And then if any questions come up, feel free to put them in the chat. We have Catherine who's going to keep an eye on the chat for us. And she'll shout out anything that needs like immediate attention, or we can save it for the end. We'll try to do a little Q&A session at the end. So my first question then, what do you see most often on founder websites? So like for service-based websites specifically, that signals that content is working against them? Stuff that's no longer serving. How do you know? Which one of you would like to jump in and start on that?
Go ahead, Susan. If you...
Okay. The biggest thing that I see is content that is focused on the wrong buyer. So remember today I'm distinctly wearing a sales hat, right? And a strategic sales hat. So content that focuses on the wrong buyer. I think, and Beck and Steph, you can correct me because I could be totally wrong and I'm going to learn so much from you today. But I think that a lot of CEO strategies are based on what I would call what buyers, not why buyers. Okay, I always have toys with me. So here's a toy, like the three
Nice.
stages of the buying process, the why stage, what stage, how stage. Why
Yep.
should I change? What are my options? How critical is it or how risky is it for me to work with you? If we have conversations and messages in a sales process over here, we have 80% chance of winning, 20% chance of winning, 0% chance of winning. So that's like, I'm very interested from a sales process point of view. You need to be having the conversation with the right buyer. And if you speak a language that is more appropriate for a how buyer or a what buyer, you will receive leads, traffic that are less strategic and you have less potential of winning it. But I think the world would tell us, talk about what you do. But I think with founders, people who have their own business, you're probably doing something different. You're doing something uniquely. So then I'm leaning over to the left to that why stage of the buying process. Like, who are they and what are they thinking? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I'll stop now. I dropped several bombs.
No, I like that a lot. Beck, what would you say from your strategic approach?
Yeah, the very first note that I have written down here is they talk about what they do as opposed to how they can help solve your problems.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, absolutely having the website that speaks to their audience and the audience's needs. And they can't do that until they have taken the time to understand what those are. So understanding their goals and feeding that into their approach to content. Yeah, that's a huge thing. A couple of other things that I see is the idea of a website as an archive as opposed to a website as a showcase. So the idea that, and this is certainly not limited to service-based businesses, founders, anything like that. Government websites, higher education, Fortune 500 websites are extremely guilty of it. No one needs to see your newsletters from 10 years ago. The idea that,
Rest in peace.
yeah. Yeah, and if there is great content in there, that's great. We're going to talk about what to do with that later. But yeah, looking at your website as really the showcasing the best of the best of your business to again demonstrate that why, demonstrate how you have helped businesses reach those goals that they have, and how potential clients can see themselves in that.
Can I drop something also from a sales process point of view? So a salesperson or a sales process will often say, don't give them too much.
Mm.
Because it depends. Like if your business is built with a sales process where you don't actually need a human to interact with them, then you need to give them everything that they need to go zzz through the 3 stages of the buying process, like zing, and just to like categorize you and figure out like, are you, are we in the right place? Should we even proceed with this? But in many sales processes, if you do have a founder or CEO or salespeople who need to be involved in the conversations, it's like, don't give them too much. Because if I give them too much content, they're going to feel like they know who we are and what we do. And they can never know that as well as if they engage with us. So that would be another red flag for me, like too much. You've tried to put your entire sales system on your website, but for your business, is that really the right thing?
Yeah. Or for your client.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I love what you, because I feel like you guys are both talking about the different types of buyers, like Susan, you certainly
Mhm.
did. And from a website design strategy perspective, we talk a lot about search intent. So understanding what the people that are coming to your website, why they're coming, because maybe they're looking for information, maybe they're looking to make that transaction, so like the strategy behind an e-commerce website that's selling like $20 gadgets is going to be completely different from someone coming to my website or someone coming to like a big Fortune 50 whatever, or like a municipal website. Those are vastly different purposes, and so they have to provide a vastly different set of functions. And I think that's something that I think when I talk to a lot of CEOs and female founders, there's this concept that like everybody's website should do this certain thing, but it's not usually something that's relevant to a service-based business. So even coming right down to talking about what is a conversion for your business, it's probably not a sale. So I mean, like the website is a sales tool, 100%, marketing tool, 100%, should be sort of relevant and whatever to whatever your business does. But whether its goal is to convert people to your mailing list or to get people onto like my roundtables or to book a call or whatever that thing is, it's going to look different for everybody.
Yeah.
And that goal should drive all of those decisions around what that functionality needs to be. So I love that whole conversation around what do your people need? What are they looking for? And then how are they going to find it? And where are the other places that they're going to find it? Because now that we're talking about AI and all of these other things, the way people are using websites is changing. So
Yeah.
what does that mean? And how do we, address that sort of thing? And it's fascinating stuff. So one of the things, like from my perspective, I love how you said about the archive, because I just went through my own website because I've been in business now for 10 years and my testimonials page is like this, blah, like here's all of the things I've ever made
So is
ever.
mine.
Just in case you might want to look. And then all of a sudden you're like, what is all of this? Oh, stop. So I rejigged it and I very like I curated it so that it's more of a prime real estate. Like, why do I have this page? It's not my filing cabinet. It's not my file folder. I want to showcase the things that are going to be relevant to the people that I know are coming to my website. And that's a big piece of it, but it's an ongoing process too, because that's the other piece, that people expect
Because it
this to be a
changes.
done deal. And it's nope.
So I love a couple of the things that are happening. Like I would say one of the themes is, it's not the same for every company what the website needs to accomplish. It's not the same for every buyer. And we have a similar challenge in sales process where what has been sort of normalized is a 3-step sales process, which is a discovery call, which is, demo or proof, and then proposal. And it's actually quite different for every company when you get below that. And so I love that the thinking here is different content for different buyers, for different types of companies. Websites have different purposes.
And it shouldn't all be on this homepage.
Right.
Because that's yeah, I don't know if you guys see this, but a lot of times, especially if we're working with someone who's been in business for like 5 years or more, everything is on the homepage because
Right.
it's like you get So I find like we just worked with someone last year. She's been in business for like 23 years. She has said all of the things that she does in 150 different ways. And on the homepage, it was stated in 150, like maybe not quite that many, but it was a lot. Like it was a lot. And it made for a lot of reading and a lot of trying to parse out, is this what she does? Maybe it's this, like maybe it's this other thing.
Mhm.
And I think it gets harder over time because you're so in it, like and you're in your own head about it. And so I think that can be a bit of a red flag too, is that, when if you haven't even scrolled and you already have no idea what you're looking at, that's maybe like let's take a step back. What are we doing? What is the purpose here? You
Mhm.
know,
I think to go back to what you were both saying about there's this idea that's been normalized that every website needs the same thing. I think there's another piece to it from thinking about it from the founder or the business owner perspective at this point is sustainability. If you launch a blog, you have the best of intentions, you're posting every week. That's great until it's no longer sustainable. And that's definitely something that ties in with timeliness of there's uh something to be said for how our perception of businesses are shaped by small things like, oh, you haven't this your last blog post is from 2021. The sale you're listing on your website was from March. Those kind of things. So I think embedding that thought up front of, am I going to be able to maintain this from a business owner
Mhm.
perspective? You know, it's it's not just because a blog or a newsletter or something that is kind of a regular output of content is a useful and sustainable approach for one type of business, it may not be for yours. So really thinking about that, as part of your strategy of how are we going to manage this in a long term, in a long term
Mhm.
way, I think
Mhm.
Yeah.
is something that comes into it too.
Yeah, and I think you need to be able to pivot, right? We all love that word. So, I mean, you might have started out with that blog and maybe you've got it featured on your homepage because that's what we used to do. We used to be like, oh, showcase this little dynamic block of content on your homepage and show all of your thought leadership and your blah, blah, blah. And then they're all dated. So then the first thing somebody sees when they land on, well, maybe not the first, but they'll see as they're scrolling down, this trust signal is now a trust killer, right? Like, because then you've created this thing where they go, oh, are they still in business?
Mhm.
Like now what's the next step for them? So you've already kind of created a hiccup.
And I,
So
I
yeah.
think another piece that's relevant to that, and I feel that potentially female founders are a little bit more guilty of this, is calling out what's not there. Things like website coming soon or like
Right.
under
Right.
construction or
Ah,
something like that, where it's like your users don't know what's missing.
Speaking of trust signal,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah.
there is.
And yeah, that's I love that. Yeah, because we don't often do that. We try to only launch stuff once it's ready.
Mhm.
But we are actually working on a project right now where the existing website got hacked, and so we had to launch it before it was actually ready. So we do have that line on a couple of spots. This section's still coming. We're still working on this, but we're very sensitive on the timing of it,
Mhm.
so that it's not going to be up there for more than a few days.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, because you just, but how, not that your average user would know that, if they were like a first time visitor, that from their perspective, it could have been up there all year. How are they going to know? But yeah.
Mhm. I have a visceral reaction to something you just discussed, not something either of you said, but just the topic. I feel like for a number of years now, the marketing world, especially, not just the marketing world, though, it's much broader, is they're pushing us to do more.
Oh,
And I actually just this morning I was on a call with a LinkedIn expert, and what blew me away in the 1 hour that we had together, it was a group. With the 1 hour was just put more, 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 more on your LinkedIn profile.
no.
And like I feel like number one, me, female founder, that is absolutely not sustainable. Number two, it is not in the service of my buyer. They're CEOs. They have very limited time frames. I need to give them what they need to go through the buying process and then say, oh, should I engage with Susan or not? And so I don't know if I'm off, but I'm really pushing that. I'm pushing that away.
Good. I I'm glad to hear it. I would my counter to that, and it hasn't changed since COVID, which is that people are living today with a burden of cognitive load that is
Yes.
unprecedented.
Yes.
And the idea of making people read my essay in order to figure out what it is that I can do that could actually help them is kind of cruel. Like so I'm a lot more I would 100% push back on that. I don't know about LinkedIn because I'm not a LinkedIn expert, but as far
It's
as
another website.
that yeah, as far as that general sort of like more and more and more and more, I think that's crap. Sorry everybody. I'll try not to use dumb words, but this idea of the more is feeding into this AI thing where people are like, oh, I'll just use AI to do the more. So then all you end up with is more and more, not really good quality, duplicate, like just sort of regurgitated stuff. It's not serving anybody that's online already. So adding more to it is not gonna set you apart. So it just creates a ton of pressure. I think it's unreasonable, and it's just to like put my full opinion out there. It's if it's not providing value to your ideal client, then it's like my testimonial page. Then do I need it? No, it's not serving me in any way, and it's not serving my client. So why would I promote it? So I'll support you on that one, Susan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, and it's interesting too, because I think a lot of what we talk, just going back to that search intent and like the buyer's process, because not just understanding, but respecting that each person is going to come at this investment process in a different way. There's also the whole like whose perspective are you writing this content from? So it's like I think Becky were saying like that who you're writing it. What were you saying? Something about I interpreted it as whether you're writing it from your own ego, like what my business does, versus how I can help you.
Yes.
Like and what the client actually needs. And I think that I think if you just did everything. Let me back up for a second. So one of my roundtables last year, one of the people was I think she was a podcaster, and she was talking about having your ideal client like a little avatar on a sticky note and keeping that on your computer or on in your workspace somewhere. So that anytime you sat down to create any piece of content, whether it was like a one-liner on social media or a blog post or a newsletter or whatever, that you looked at that person and said, would this person really get what I'm saying? And would this really resonate with her? Or would that bring her joy? Or, whatever. Like you can get as deep and profound as you want. And if it doesn't, then don't publish it right away. Like just think about it and go, what is the purpose of this? Is this like an ego trip for me? Because I know I've been guilty of that in the past. They feel this need to sort of feel like you need to stand out because you're so smart.
Yeah, I love that.
Right.
One of the things that I take to my workshops, and I meant to bring it this morning, but to kick off this conversation that actually would help the two of you in working with your clients. One of the things that I bring is a mirror, and I have a red and a black dollar store mirror that is in my workshop kit. So I just had to draw it fast. So I have them hold this
It's not
mirror.
colored, Susan.
I know. Oh, it's
not
it's
sufficient.
black. It's black.
Okay.
Trust
Okay.
me.
Okay.
So I have them hold this up and say, hold it up to your website, and who is it reflecting? If it's reflecting you, you haven't done your job. If it's reflecting them and they see, wow, she gets me. She understands what's on my mind. How did she figure out what is on my mind and what I'm worrying about at 3 o'clock in the morning? Then we've done our job right. And then we kind of go through an exercise and they just go, oh my goodness, like it's 80% about us. And we jokingly call it the junkyard of poorly executed sales and marketing, because it just needs to be tossed out and, shift.
Mhm.
I think that sometimes people misinterpret this as you can't talk about yourself as a business owner.
Yeah,
Um,
not true.
but which is not at all what it means.
Mhm.
It's talking about yourself in the context of what you do and how that helps and supports your clients. So I think a lot of people come to this thinking, oh, um, my about page is, about I can't have a personality to my business or to my website. I can't be the face of it because, that's not
Sad.
what people are looking for. But that's not true at all. It's, yeah, take exactly like you said, even in that content that is about you, holding that mirror up to say, in this, where
Mhm.
can the clients see themselves?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And Beck, maybe it's a question of timing too, is it?
Mhm.
Like a question of timing, like the first thing they need to see is themselves. That's what
Yeah.
I would vote for, because then if they don't feel like this can help me, this company or this individual understands me, then they don't go further. But then as you
Yes.
go into different sections of the website, or in my language, into different parts of their thinking through the buying process, then it's like, no, I get to the point where I definitely need to know something about you.
Mhm.
Need to know about your services. And actually, I'd be super happy if you had a personality.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
exactly.
think I would suggest, I don't have any stats in front of me, and Susan, you might actually know this better than I do, but um the buying process for different ages of your demographic, your client demographic, is
Mm.
going to determine some of that as well. And
Mhm.
my understanding, and this was a stat that I've okay, so full disclosure, I'm really good at referencing stats. I don't always get them correct. This one, because I'm better if it's like written down in front of me. But this one was about the upcoming generations and how there's a much more of an ethical approach to their buying, because
Right,
they have an ethical, like they will identify with the brand and they will support, like they'll be loyal
right,
in
right.
a way that's different from other generations. And so that idea of having the about page be really, really dead clear about what sets you apart
Mhm.
specifically, so that you can try to, because it's all about relationships, right? So, and I think even though, a lot of us, Gen X millennials, sort of tease a little bit about the younger folks out there, there is a really strong element that's backed up by these stats that I'm pretty much making up because I don't have them written down in front of me, is that they are really committed. Like when they decide that they're going to
Mm,
use their money on somebody, they're committed to it, and they stay loyal to it,
mm,
until something happens, to
mm.
send them elsewhere. But
And
yeah, so I think that's an interesting thing to add
Makes
in.
sense.
yeah,
Intuitively, I don't have the stats either,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Okay.
and I think
You're welcome, everybody. We just gave you our personal opinion with nothing to back it up.
I think they definitely also bring a values lens to it as well, which is something that so Steph, you and I first connected last year when I attended one of these roundtables that you held.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that was something that very much struck me about your business and, encouraged me to reach out to you was the values that you put front and center around accessibility, around lifting up female founders, things like that. That I'm not claiming to be I'm firmly a elder millennial, but
Mhm.
but that was definitely something that stood out to me about the way that you present yourself in your business.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm glad. I'm glad to hear that. It's I think it's more important than ever, especially for women in business. Because I think we do business differently. The things that resonate with us is different from what all of the bros in the marketing world are telling us, like Susan with your LinkedIn, more, more, more. Um, and I'm going, no, no, no. I'm good, I'm good, I'm good.
Mhm.
Um, but I think it's really important to try to find that balance, and the balance in terms of like how much do you say and how much do you share, and what that, and trying to keep that perspective, like why are you sharing it, um, and it's not an easy thing, and that's the other piece that I think is really important for folks to remember. And I think I said something about this already, but like this is a constantly evolving thing.
Mhm.
You know, like our users are changing all the time. You know, my user expectations now when I'm on my fancy little phone are wildly different from what they were 10 years ago.
Very
You know,
much.
never mind like dial-up, right? Like like the expectations that we've trained our customers on
Mhm.
in the internet overall are vastly different from what they were even last year.
Yeah.
So as these things change, we have to be prepared to recognize that these tools that we're using also have to change. It's not that different from all the other tools that you use in your business. It's just for some reason we get this weird sort of thing about our website. I'm talking about the website specifically, that it's like a slice of our ego, or I don't know what it is exactly, but there's like these weird little things that get all tangled up in it. It's not just a
Mhm.
website, you know, it's a really interesting
Yeah.
piece, maybe.
I
And
mean,
I think that's unique to female founders.
yeah. It's kind of consistent even with just the general trajectory of scaling a company, right? Like at the beginning, it's about you, but now
Sure.
you get large enough that you have a team, and it can't actually all be about you because it's a team doing delivery or be having the first contact and things like that. And whatever that cycle is, it's almost like the website and the website content in parallel need to shift to align with that change
Sure.
where you are in the stage of your scale up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think
very
as you get clearer on what you do, right? Like, because I
much
mean, when I
so.
started out, I was calling myself a web designer
Yeah.
and I was doing graphic design as well. And so I had a blog because that's what you did back then. You had a website and then you had a blog to drive traffic to your website, which doesn't work anymore, by the way. But the highest performing blog post on my blog was about how to size a business logo. And when I stopped doing graphic design, it's completely irrelevant. So so yeah, the evolution, you know,
Mm,
this content is literally no longer serving. Yeah, it's bringing people in, but who are these people? Are they actually?
Yes.
No, they're not at all. So yeah, so it's things will change and they should change, and that's okay.
yeah. And
So
if they don't change, like even from a sales process point of view, like if it doesn't evolve and change as you go along, then I know, uh-oh, there's a problem here. And we're going to see the results dip in a period of time if that isn't evolving, because what we sell is evolving, our understanding of how to sell it is evolving, our expertise around our own expertise is evolving,
yeah,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
So it
love
needs,
that.
yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's excellent. Very nice. So then, okay, so then let's say that we've evolved.
Mm,
I mean, I have some ideas about how to decide what you're going to keep, what you're going to cut, what you're going to rework. So
mhm.
for both of you, from your perspectives, doing website strategy and from that buyer's process and the sales process, what are some of the things that you would use to approach that decision?
Hmm. You go first, Beck. This is your
Sure.
world.
Thing. So I think you mentioned before about how, website's always just a little bit more than your website. And the same goes for organizations of any size. Different departments within an organization have different feelings of ownership around a website, different push-pull around authority versus responsibility, things like that. So I really think the first thing to kind of lock down is around your mindset when you're approaching what to do with your content. I think it's really important to come to terms with, just because you spent time or money developing a specific piece of content, or it could be a whole suite of content. If it's no longer serving you, that's just because you spent time or money on it isn't a reason to to keep the content
Oh,
in the fold.
that's awesome. I like that. Yeah. Yeah,
I
totally
think
true.
I think the key to that is understanding, and again, organizations of all sizes, you're just unpublishing it. It's still there.
Mm,
If it
Mhm.
if it comes
like,
back around and it's useful again, you can pull it back up and set it to work for you. But if it's not, if it's a a piece from a different puzzle that you're trying to fit in to your almost complete puzzle otherwise. It's still there. It still exists. You can use it as it becomes useful again. But
Just made them feel comfortable.
yeah.
Like just and I have a client who's a very large organization. They have tons of content, and I can just imagine then them hearing that would make them comfortable and would empower them to actually make decisions they would not make otherwise. You can bring
Yeah,
it back.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's never lost. It's always there. It's your own internal archive, of content to exactly. I saw a comment there in the chat, to repurpose, um, that kind of thing. And I think that that's a really big having that shift in mindset kind of frees you quite a bit to make decisions. There's definitely, I mean, we've spoken about knowing your goals, knowing your audience, things like that. There are definitely other pieces that kind of come into the decision-making process. Moving on from there, like my favorite one is like look at your analytics, start with your top 20 pages, do a lot more sorry, do less, focus on what's gonna, 80/20, what's gonna give you the biggest return. But yeah, that mindset shift really kind of helps to free people from that concern of wanting to hold on to things.
Mhm.
I really like that. That's fascinating because it's kind of like we talk a lot about Marie Kondo from like a housekeeping
Right.
perspective, and like what when you're holding those things and you have invested a lot of time or energy or what feels like heart and soul into that thing, especially if it's content that you've created because that feels like a piece of you, and then especially if you had to pay somebody else to help you do it, and then that whole making that decision sometimes of releasing that, even releasing yourself from the pressure of making the decision can be a really big step. And so I really like that. And I wonder if is there like a secondary discussion then that you have around like how do you put that content into some sort of a usable archive? Because that's something that we talk a lot about is just because you have it, if it's in a format you can't use, or it just
I
goes into like a Google folder and you never look at it again.
I think there are kind of two pieces to that. The first one for me is, what else is going on with your website? If you're migrating to a new system, and that's a huge project in and of itself. What is the easiest lift? The idea that you can still like you mentioned earlier, Steph, you can still publish your website with a baseline of content and be adding to it over time. So I think it's a bit more amorphous there, depending on what is the system you're coming from versus the system that you're going into, and things like that. But what I really like is it's not it's not fancy. It's just a spreadsheet, just importing in, list of, and this is something that, a report from Google Analytics can serve this purpose. It's giving you the page name, it's giving you a link to, like, if you're just unpublishing, it's giving you a link to the draft page, things like that. I think a lot of people feel like they're kind of starting net new. But if if you have that record, you're like, okay, I have this understanding of what is the really important content on my website in terms of visitation and in terms of the conversion, and really having that focus and taking that into something that is like a cyclical review, whether it's once a quarter, you're sitting down and you're looking at those stats and saying, all right, I'm going to take a look at these pages, and part of that can be, all right, here's what we had previously deactivated. Let's go take a look. Especially if your business is seasonal, you might do a lot of your business in the fall. So, not so relevant in spring. you've taken it down, but you know what's coming up, so you can take a look at that and kind of identify that what can be reused, whether it's a different format, whether it's, you know, easy to just you just update some dates and for an event and republish. You know, it's
Right.
something that I think if you have a cycle to it, and it doesn't have to be a big lift, like use your data to inform where you're going to get the most value.
Mm.
Use your data.
Yeah.
Use your data. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. I just like how I like how you kind of slid that in because that's that because I think a lot of times, certainly with the people that with a lot of the clients that we work with, they don't have data, or they have it, they don't understand how to interpret it, and I totally get that. So so yeah, use the data, because what your opinion is may not be valid, right? It's like you don't actually know what
And
your
it
users are resonating with if you don't have the data to see what's
and
actually
it,
happening.
it doesn't have to be a deep dive into the data by any
No.
means. Like there are some very key data points that you can look at to help you understand if, you know, visits, conversion, like keep it simple.
Yeah. Like with me with that blog post. Like that showed up, it was top pages. Like top, it was in the top, I think I can't remember if it was the top 10 or the top 15, but I went, whoa,
Yeah.
no, no. So I didn't have to dig into like who's looking at it, what are they doing from there? No, I'm not even gonna go there. For that particular decision. I mean, if I had decided to update it or, you know, repurpose it elsewhere, that would have been different. But at the time, my decision was to cut it.
Right.
So
Made
yeah,
sense. Your strategy changed, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And yeah,
Right.
it's fun. I like the data has to back up the decision.
Can I drop a bomb?
Yeah.
Um, so one of the things I struggle with um, is data versus people, right? So we could be generating a massive amount of content. Oh, no, we could be generating all of the traffic or the engagement or whatever on a particular blog post, for example, but it may actually not be in alignment with our strategy. It may not be in alignment with our buyer. It may not be in alignment with the new buyer we're going after. It may not be in alignment with our new strategy, et cetera. So that's kind of the mindset I come at it with, because not only did I not have the statistics, Steph, but I will never have those statistics. I will just keep repeating you for 10 years. But intuitively and from a process point of view, because I see that happen often, that there is a disconnect between, like you, I think one of you started this off by saying, you know, things change, you know, we evolve. So where I would start first is I would start with the people. And I would say, get the right people in the room. So there would be Beck and there would be Steph and there would be the founder, and then there would be someone else who also represents maybe the sales side. And that would be the first piece for me, like, because are we on track? I'll give you an example. A client I'm working with right now, they have just fundamentally changed a piece in their sales process that has majorly differentiated how they will interact with customers and which customers will resonate with what they do. So if we didn't get in the room together and explain, this is the sales process, this is the thing that's resonating. Okay, so that would be the first thing that I would do. So everybody is on that same sales process, and then like the marketing process will match. The second thing that I'm thinking of is conversation. So and I see this in sales teams, I see it in marketing content. Often the content that may be created is never quite as alive as what you would create if you actually had conversations with your customers. So that's one of the things I do, is I either say, if you won't do it by a midnight tonight, I want 5 introductions in my inbox. I will interview these people. I will find out what they're thinking. I will find out what their language is, because there's a French expression, I don't know what it is in English, tournure de phrase. Turn of phrase. Do we use that?
Right. Yeah.
Like the buyer will have these subtle ways of expressing what's going on in their world that actually isn't profitability, revenue growth, scaling, whatever. Like they'll have this language, and when they can see that language in the content, that'll be like, and it doesn't negate any of this process that Beck, you've just been talking about at all. But it's like if I can add those two things on top of a project like this, we are golden. And it significantly shifts the tone, the words we use, content, et cetera. And then when everybody is aligned like that, it's just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
I think one of the so you're absolutely right, Susan. I think the difference between the capacity of a small business owner to get those brains in a room to have those conversations is hugely variable. Up to Fortune 50, companies. What is not variable is the ability to talk to your clients.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Business owner of any size can have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And get those pieces of, keywords,
diamonds,
to
jewels.
feed in. Exactly right.
And I think the advantage that a founder-led enterprise has, and enterprise is not the right word, but a smaller is all of that may be in one person.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just to, part it out and saying, I'm coming to the table today with the strategy hat on. I'm coming to the table as the person who knows our buyers the best. I'm coming to the table as the person who executes on our sales process. And what actually is it? It's not formalized, but what if I just map out what I do and then so it can be in one person.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I did just want to mention, I know we spoke a little bit about data. Something that so for a very long time, the idea of data-driven decision making was a big buzzword, a big, things are like, we're looking at the data and based on the data, we are making a decision. I think that things have evolved to a point where we need to be making data-informed decisions rather than data-driven decisions, because you might have two pieces of data about the same thing that entirely conflict. And exactly as you said, Susan, your customers, if data can't process those bits of gold that the customer are giving you in the conversation.
I love that phrase.
Bringing those together.
And there's for me, that example, that phrase, data informed, or what did you say? Data. Yeah, you said data informed. So for me, there's a very powerful example of that in my personal life. I had symptoms for decades and, oh, no, you're fine. All the blood tests, everything, you're fine. And I found one doctor who had an expertise in this certain things. And he said, Susan, I think you have X. Did a test, X didn't show it. 3 years later, Susan, I really think you have X. Started to treat me as if I have X. And my life changed. Then he had access to another test and tested me, and indeed I had X, right? So the data on, either wasn't sufficient or on its own. But it was that intuitive, that knowledge, or even from his perspective, I could say it was processed because he had many, many clients with X, right? I don't know if that makes any sense, but it just makes it more personal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it brings back in that idea that you need that strategic oversight.
Yes.
You can't do everything for the data, and you can't do everything based on.
Yeah, that's lovely. I love that dichotomy. That's beautiful.
Yeah. There's like a little Venn diagram that we could make.
There is.
The little sweet spot right in the middle. And so, yeah, and I think the idea of, when we're looking at what to keep or what to cut or what to rework or whatever, that kind of trying to align those different pieces is the ideal for sure. And then trying to say again back to that, who is that person you're trying to bring in and what do they need? So then is it findable for them? Is it helpful to them? Is it what they're actually searching for? And then how, or is it what they're expecting to find on your website? Because those things can often make a big difference, versus creating something because you felt obligated.
Yeah, there you go.
Right there. I can't see it.
Sales strategy, buyer, and data. And we could even broaden sales strategy to be, sales strategy, marketing strategy, business strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're gonna break Susan and her marker all the time. That's so fun. Okay, so let's move on. So my next question. Can you, so based on all of this stuff around like strategy and like trying to pick and choose and be really intentional and aligned with the stuff that we're putting on our websites. This is specifically around websites, but it could be like because a website is part of your marketing toolbox. It could be sort of a larger picture thing. Can you either of you share a time when old content, so specifically legacy stuff, not my blog post about graphic design, actually became a powerful asset with like a little bit of a tweak? So that might have been something that was repurposed, or it could have been just changed a bit, which is, I guess, repurposed. What would either of you have to share there?
Yeah, you wanna start us off, Susan?
I can, but I think when I start you off, it may be just a little slightly different. It may not be content that is on the website. Is that okay? It's
Yes.
content. It's an
It's
asset.
old. It's old. It's old. Yeah, yeah.
It's old and it's an asset.
I say
So
old with love. Like I'm not. This is old with love. It's not like a judgy. This isn't a judgy thing.
yeah,
It's just
okay,
like
good.
you've got some pre-existing stuff that's maybe not
Mhm.
serving
So
us.
here's an example. I have a client and their leader of their customer success is brilliant. And there's a process that he developed, a very deep process that he developed, and has been delivering for probably 2 years. And he's been delivering this, but only with people who have signed up to be clients. And then all of a sudden, so it's around a while. So in that context, it's old. But all of a sudden, there was an aha moment about 2 months ago, and the aha moment was, we have this asset. This is incredibly valuable in delivery. But can you imagine what would happen if we used that in the sales and marketing process? So they've brought it into the sales process, and we're working on embedding that and institutionalizing that. And they've started to bring it into their internal kind of language and go to market. And then eventually it will be website content from an old asset. And it's just, and it's like it's a game changer. One of the things that I find, like one of the types of content, and this is an example of it, is one of the types of content that I find extremely valuable from a sales process perspective, and I believe so from a marketing perspective as well, is the things that change the way your potential buyers think about the problem they have, and the things that change their mind about the way they think about the potential solutions to their problem. To me, that is what differentiates all founders and the processes and the work. Otherwise, we're all, no discredit, but otherwise we're all accountants. We're doing the same thing, and we're building beautifully profitable businesses doing that. But if there's anything unique than that piece of content, and I think this kind of old content is an example of that, it shifts the mindset of the buyer. The buyer might be in a buying process, and all of a sudden they turn around, they're in their car, and all of a sudden they turn around and say, I was almost finished and ready to buy, bloop, I need to come back and get in the car and invite this other company into the car, because that shifted the way I think about things. That was maybe a rant.
I'm just going to shout out Susan and her props. I'm going to have to up my game here. Yeah, I think that's really great, and I love that. I love that idea that, especially after we've been in business for a while, we're often sitting on a pile of stuff, quote unquote, that
Yeah.
is an asset, and we don't necessarily recognize it as
Mm-hmm.
such. So I think that's beautiful, and I hope that transition turns into a really cool thing for your client.
Yeah,
That's
I
really
think it
cool.
will.
Yeah, awesome. Beck, what about you?
Yeah, to kind of stick with the theme that Susan's talking about there, like looking at content that might live outside a website and what kind of life it could have on a website. I spent a lot of my career in public institutions, including museums. They're there publishing their beautiful quarterly magazine that is just like packed full of really interesting interviews, information, surfacing things that, are, they have a collection of millions of pieces and they're, surfacing things that the majority of the world have never seen before or don't know that
Mm.
exist. And from a, thinking in a large scale organizational perspective, for a really long time, those silos of the magazine lives over here and the website lives over here. Those silos kept that content from living on and having another life and being even more accessible, for a really long time until there was kind of an opportunity to say, hey, there's a bit of a handshake we can do here. And I think, Susan, you and I had this conversation last week, the idea of even businesses and organizations that don't see themselves as selling something are fundamentally selling
Absolutely.
something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I think about this museum example with the magazine, the one of the ways that you received the magazine was by becoming a member. And that becomes a selling point. If you can, should be showcasing, these great pieces of content that are only available in print, and you're creating that demand, you're creating that interest around that. There are opportunities that they don't necessarily initially come to mind as sales opportunities, but they are about expanding your reach and they are about bringing in more of that key audience that you're looking for. And I know that that's a very large scale example. I think there are definitely similar examples in much smaller scale businesses, whether it is repurposing things like presentations, webinars, perhaps there was a time where you pumped out a newsletter in a PDF or something like that, where it's things that we might not necessarily think, fit in the context of website content. But I think there are definitely opportunities there. Like think about what additional life the work that you're doing could have as you're doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I wonder if it would help to say, look at these things in terms of, what are some pieces of content that would help me to nurture this relationship
Yeah.
with this potential
Yeah,
person, not the
nice
data.
happening.
I mean, you can build a relationship with the data too if that's your jam. But if you like, instead of looking at it, because I think a lot of women in business certainly we struggle a bit with this sort of sales language, and it feels very transactional. And so if we spin it around a little bit, because it's still content, it's still an asset, it's still an example of your thought leadership, it's an example of that unique position that you have in your market, your positioning statement, whatever the thing, then it might make it easier to look at that from that different lens and to say, oh, you know what, this would be an excellent value add or an excellent, benefit to my membership or, whatever that sort of element might be.
And especially when, you already have the core of the work. You're not having to create one, come up with additional ideas, and two, having to create things from scratch. If you have these existing assets, I mean, you definitely want to be aware of things like avoiding duplicate content on your website and things like that. But if you can evergreen things and really turn them into things that are timeless, that's something that I think, along with that lens of, is this serving my customer? I think that's really where you see that value of, keeping some of that older content.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love that. I love that idea. So this is something that we've recently started doing, which is after we do like a rebuild, we'll help do I'm calling them content libraries. It's like a topic cluster. And so we'll take like if you like we had a client recently, she's been in business for about 19 years or something, and she's had all of these written articles, like written pieces elsewhere. Nothing was
Yes.
on
Yeah.
her website, but it was elsewhere. So she had all of the like, and really expert, business development, CEO, like very high level language. And she was feeling all of this pressure because everybody's like, you gotta create more content, you gotta create more content, you need a lead magnet, you need a this thing, you need this other thing. And she was like, I don't have time to create all of this stuff. And we were like, you're
I've
writing a
already
book.
spent the time.
You're writing a book. You've already shown me all of these business pamphlet, newslettery, like white paper, like you have all of this written content already. What? I don't think you need to start over anything from scratch. And so we took some of her work and sort of picked out some topics that would resonate with her people and her target client. And then we created from what she already had a new evergreen library. It's very concise and curated. It's that same idea again with my testimonial page, rather than having this plethora of words that all says pretty much the same thing, being much more careful and intentional about it. And it's really cool because it's this, we're always putting so much pressure on ourselves to start stuff from scratch. And if we're not identifying what those assets are in the content that we've already built, that is maybe we just haven't thought about it, or we don't have a little spreadsheet to keep track of it, or like whatever that sort of housekeeping etiquette is that we haven't implemented, or systems, whatever you want to call it, then chances are we're already sitting on a gold mine of potential stuff, provided it's still relevant and provides value.
Right.
And
that's still going to be the key.
the other thing is also that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. For example, if potentially this client that you're talking about, Steph, they may have been published in, quite well-renowned publications. You don't have to bring that content into your website. It's a matter of a page that says, this article was published in such and such. Here's a description of what it is. Link. You don't have to kind of like leverage that exposure elsewhere. You don't have to kind of bring it all into your owned, properties, as it were. Especially, if they are whether it's a publication or an organization or a foundation that is highly regarded in the industry that your clients are, that you're seeking clients from. That's a great way you're still featuring it on your website, but you're kind of maintaining that authority that other organization brings.
Oh, so I have a follow-up question for you. And this one might apply more to Beck, but with content, say if you've written something on a journalism page or like a newspaper article kind of thing, and now it's partially hidden behind a paywall. So then when you're going to create that content and then link it, which would have been the perfect structure before, because then you're getting links as well, like inbound and outbound links. So then there's this piece of like, well, what happens to that content? Like, do you actually own it? Do you get to share it? Do you know? So there's like there is that ownership piece again.
Definitely.
About where your stuff is, where it lives.
I think that I would definitely encourage and empower people to ask those questions, to be reaching out to those publications or organizations to say, what's the deal? Like be upfront with, what you would like to do with it. If you have contracts or you kind of something to look back on, that's great. If you're in a position to renegotiate something, that kind of thing. But I think, that is something that, especially if it was created, perhaps you were, it was something you wrote for your employer or something like that. I think having those conversations are super valuable. I know that when you're getting into things like scientific journals or, things like that, it's a bit of a different set of rules. I can't really speak to them, but I think outside of that, absolutely have the conversation and just be upfront with, I'd really like to, leverage this content in a way that's beneficial to both of us. This is what I'm thinking. How can this work?
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because we often, well, I don't see it as much anymore. That's just an anecdotal thing. We do still come across it where people want to have like an in the media page, with a list of
Mm,
links
mm.
to
Yes.
PR and stuff.
Yeah.
And I have noticed that a lot of those are,
Behind a paywall.
they're, yeah. They're still providing some benefit to the
Mhm.
client's website. But then as far from a user perspective, you're like, well,
Yeah.
what's the point of that? So there's an interesting little, just not that you have to do one thing or the other, but just to be aware of it.
Yeah.
So that,
I think there's also an opportunity there potentially to call that out to say, I know this content is paywalled.
Mhm.
If you want to talk about this topic, reach out. Let's have a chat about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Being open to that. You're stating the reality, like you're not trying to hide the fact that it's paywalled, or you're not trying to trick them into,
To sell them on something.
exactly.
Yeah,
But to
yeah,
just say, here are the themes of this article.
yeah,
Let's reach out if you want to have a chat.
yeah. That's awesome. Especially because, and I think you've already said about the duplicate content.
Mhm.
Like the last thing you want to do is copy what
Yes.
was written on that
Yeah,
other
exactly.
site and bring it over. You don't want that. So yeah, so that's really cool. Okay, so let's move on to another question. So
Can I go back with one comment?
yeah, of
Is
course.
that
Yeah.
just want you a stab in my heart, which I totally
Oh,
understand about. No, it's okay. It's good.
okay.
Female founders being afraid of this salesy thing, right? And then right
Yeah.
after, yeah, that's another roundtable because it doesn't need to be. But what you said right after that was nurturing. So
Mhm.
I'd like to marry those two concepts and have one comment. Nurturing, we are co-pilots in a sales process. We're not the driver. We are co-pilots. And by definition, that is more of a nurturing, question asking relationship as opposed to a pushy relationship. And one of the things that I subconsciously associate with nurturing is I'm not really nurturing my relationship with my potential buyer if I am only talking, writing, posting about me and about my company, right?
Mhm.
And it just goes back to the mirror test, and a lot of what we spoke earlier is nurturing is I am in the car, I am in the passenger seat, they're in the driver's seat, and what conversation online or offline do I have to keep that conversation going?
Mhm.
It's just a
Yeah.
mental model.
Yeah. No, I like that a lot. And it's part of the honestly, I think it's part of the difference with women in business. I think
Right.
they're more aware of that
Right.
relationship that we're trying to build with our
Mhm. Which is
audience
a
or with
very
our
good thing.
target clients or whatever, right? And I think that's one of the things that helps us to stand out in the market, certainly. And it's also a part of the empathy that we bring to that
Yes,
relationship building that is
absolutely.
missing in
Absolutely.
a lot of other places, especially online. So based on all of that, then, if we were to say, because we want to tell these stories, we want the stories to resonate with our target person, our ideal client, hopefully. And everybody's telling you to tell stories, that that's the way to sell and that's the way to generate interest and eyeballs and all of that. So then if you were going to try to balance those marketing expectations with the storytelling and the strategy when you're reviewing these things, what do you think is the best way to balance those things? Or do you think we've already talked about that?
I think it comes down to that idea of being intentional. That you can only do what you have the capacity to do. But if you go into it with intention, especially around focusing on that value for your audience, I think that balance will kind of rise to the top a bit organically.
Susan, any comments there?
I'm not sure if I'm getting your question exactly, Steph, but let me try something. Okay.
Okay.
I
Only
think,
with a prop.
oh, right. You want a prop?
Yeah.
Prop.
I require props.
Is there a new
Trained
prop
me.
I can use? New prop I can use? Yeah, new prop.
I put you right on the spot. You're welcome.
Yeah, steering wheel. Okay, so we're in the car with our buyer. We're going through the buying process with them. If that's with our website and our website content, don't ask me about props. I have lots of them.
I'm tempted. Okay.
You know, we're going through the buying process with them, right?
Yep.
So again, I don't know if I'm really answering your question, but to me, there's a story or multiple stories within each stage of the buying process. There are different processes, and it's just a nice fluid flow of this is the story or the things we talk about in the why stage of the buying process. And if we're still in the car together and you haven't pressed the eject button and I'm out, then now we're telling the story and I'm telling you a story in the what stage of the buying process about something that I have done that has helped somebody just like you. And if you still haven't pressed the eject button, I realize there are other people in the back seat because there's lots of competitors. But if we're still together, then we get to the stage where there's another story we tell about the value and the ROI and whatever. So I don't know if that I don't know if that is at all relevant because you're asking from a marketing concept, but to me, the whole process is a story.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I love steering wheel. Of course you have a steering wheel.
It's from a lawn tractor. Everybody wants to know the brand. I'm sorry, don't know the brand.
I don't need to know the brand. That's a detail that's unnecessary for me. But I love the it's just that reminder. I think it still comes back to that genuine relationship.
Absolutely, it does.
So
yeah.
I do think that, you know, as things are going along with these new changes online with how everybody's looking for things and how information is being presented, I think the more genuine and authentic those stories can be, the better we have of not getting sucked into that rat race. You know,
absolutely.
Who's first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, super cool. Okay, last question, and then I think we'll move into some FAQs, although I think we've lost a few attendees, so that might be short. It's all good. As far as like a quick win, if either of you, Susan and Beck, would have maybe one, maybe two really quick wins that somebody could like leave today and apply right away, what would be like your top suggestion? Beck, let's start with you.
Okay, so I think you've spoken a lot about how, you know, search is changing, continually evolving, and you know, we've all seen those the way that AI has started to permeate the way that we look for information. So I think while it was always important looking at your website for information that is factually incorrect, things that are wrong, things that are no longer right, because you know, we're still not entire like prior to AI kind of, you know, coming into the mix, there was a general understanding about what it would take to scrub incorrect information from your footprint on the web. I think that we don't necessarily have that understanding yet. You know, what is the lifespan or the longevity of information once it gets gobbled up by that AI. So I think, yeah, you know, making sure that there is, you know, the information that is on your website, especially as it relates to things like pricing, to things like contact information, things like claims you might be making about what your product or service does. You know, making sure that there is accuracy in that as much as possible, just from a you know, a reputation management standpoint. I mean, so I think that has quickly, if you'd asked me a year ago, I don't think I would have said that as number one, but I think that has quickly risen to the top. I think number two is really looking at looking at your content in a cyclical way, you know, making that time for yourself to sit down once a quarter, once a year, you know, depending on how much you put out there, to do that kind of have a look at, you know, what you're putting out there, and to use that data, have those conversations with your clients, and just doing that consistently. I think you know, for a long time, the message when you talk about websites is that, your website isn't done when you hit the launch button. The website lives on, it continues to evolve, you have to maintain it. So if you can put some structure behind that and some process, I think that really helps people feel more comfortable and make it feel like a more manageable task. Because it can be overwhelming. I mean, you have so many other moving pieces in your business. You know, your website is not going to be top of mind every day. So if you can set that time aside and have clarity about what that process is going to be when you get to that day in your calendar, that's something that can really, it's a quick win. It's a low-hanging fruit, but it's something that will reward you over and over again because you'll be picking up those things.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think looking at it quarterly, honestly, most of our clients, I usually tell them not to look at their stats any more frequently because you get kind of caught up in details and you go down little rabbit holes. We do have a few clients that keep an eye on things monthly, but generally speaking,
I mean, unless you're doing campaigns and you're measuring progress, or you're talking about thousands and thousands of hits a day, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And you can lose track, I think, like doing it at least quarterly, doing it at minimum quarterly, but like maybe even every 6 to 9 months, you can help see the trends. Because, the reality that people tend to forget too is that search engine optimization is not an overnight thing. And it takes a while for things to pick up. So you could write something and it could take 3 to 4 months for it to start to generate some real traction. So if you're looking at it every 3 months or God forbid every month, and you're like, nothing's happening, I'm going to scrub that. I'm going to remove that content. You've just, like, you're not giving it a chance to percolate and do its thing. So I like that I like that strategic approach. Again. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
You just calmed my nervous system, Steph. Just by saying like, look at it quarterly and like, that
or
is
have a partner who does it for you. Like,
calm down. Yeah.
That's part of what we do, right?
Too much data. Like
we don't even say you have to meet with us to go over all of the numbers. We're just like, here's your
nice.
In fact, what we started doing, because we used to do reporting, and then people were like, I don't get it. And I was like, yeah, no, I don't blame you. So now we just do a now, next, then. Here's what's going on now. Here's what we think you might want to look at. And then, what is that?
That's beautifully simple. Yeah, I love that.
It's a lot easier.
And Beck, in a way, I'm amazed that you put forward the first the two priorities that you did, like that we even have to think about that. But I would say it's absolutely true for me. I do neither one of those two things on a regular basis. Yeah. And I can say it's true for almost all of my clients historically as well. So like spot on. I had a different two. The one thing that I would do right away is just do the mirror test and just say, is this mostly about me? And then cull to make that just a more appropriate balance of about them and about me, hoping that there is content that is about them. And then the second thing I would do I would identify the most strategic buyer, so the why buyer. And I would identify from a sales process point of view, what am I asking or saying, or what are they telling me? Or what are we doing together that seems to be the biggest bomb or change in their thinking or how they proceed in their business? What is that one thing, or what is one thing that I could create as I know this is keep, cut, and
convert.
I'm adding. Hello.
Okay.
So what is that one thing that I could add that truly represents the most strategic conversation I'm having in the passenger seat with the most strategic buyer that has the most value to them? And then that would be like,
so I would say just take that thing. You probably already have it.
I think you're absolutely right.
Review it, convert it, and update it,
right.
And add like a relevant call to action.
And you may have it just with like a gift wrapping paper on it that looks like it's for a different buyer. And so just a quick shift, just like change a little bit of the language, put a little paragraph at the beginning. I'm now meandering into an area where I do not have expertise, but then you wrap it back up, wrap that wrapping, and it's repurposed.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. So, and then I would say, what I would love to see people do is go to your homepage. So we're not going to talk about what's happening on the search engines for this part of the conversation, but go to your homepage and just look at the above the fold piece. Don't even start scrolling. Just look at the above the fold and just say, like, what can a stranger understand what I do and who I do it for
Oh,
out
yeah,
of this first top piece?
Yeah.
And then if it takes you 5 seconds, it takes you 5 seconds to figure it out. If it takes more than 5, there's too much happening. And it's time to start thinking about who your people are and
It's
then how to deliver
huge.
that message. Yeah.
It's
And
huge.
then honestly, if you have a lot of content and you're not using it and nobody's visiting it either. So like, because a lot of this depends on how you're going to use it. Like if you're writing stuff and you're sharing it directly, that's great, as long as it's part of that intentional strategy. But if you've got a bunch of stuff on your website and nobody's looked at it in a year or longer, it could be adding some serious bulk and
But
probably.
I think that to your point, Steph, like if there is content there, it might not be getting the traffic, but if you're doing that mirror test and you're seeing, I really think this can add value, I think that there's the opportunity to say, okay, how can I promote this? How can I, make this more visible and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And see, we didn't even really get into talking about that, but like one of the best, one of the not the one of the best, but one of the things that we often find, especially with the older content, like for blog posts, is that there's no call to action. So there's no next step. So you've
Yes.
created this thing, you maybe created it ages ago, like my graphic design blog. And what is like, so great, somebody came and read it, and then what? They just kind of, it's like that silo kind of idea. They just read your whole thing. Especially if they got down to the bottom, they read your whole thing, you guys. So then what is the next step? And is there something that's relevant to both of you? And then try to figure out what that is and add that in.
I
I think I
love that.
better jump in, guys, and let you know that you've got 9 minutes left. If there's any
Oh,
questions you might want to take, if anyone has any questions.
Were there any in the chat so far? There were a
Lots of great
couple.
comments, and people saying they're happy. Sorry, I'm going to get the name wrong here. Wakwa. People are now talking about AEO, answer engine optimization, more and more. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, that was one of the comments I found interesting.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think that definitely relates to that idea of making sure your website information is accurate, because that's what's being pulled in to create those answers. And we hear a lot about AI having hallucinations and making things up, but um, you know, that information comes from somewhere. It's being interpreted in some way. It's not it's not being pulled from, it's not being, magically
Yeah,
created.
it's coming from somewhere.
It's coming from somewhere. And I think we don't yet know, what's the longevity of that? How do you, you know, how long do you have to wait till that, falls out of an AI generated answer?
Yeah. So can I tell you something really crazy about that? So and this is sort of related to what Waco was just saying about the AEO, because there's all these acronyms now, you guys, it's bonkers. So there's like GEO, which is generative engine optimization. There's the SEO, there's the SXO that I talked about. There's all sorts of stuff. But the one of the things that blows my mind about the AI overviews and the is because from our perspective, this whole thing around whatever's impacting where your website shows up in the search results is kind of a big deal. But at the same time, online search behavior is changing and the click-through rate to websites is changing. So then that, kind of changes your perspective in terms of if you had a strategy before that was all about getting clicks to your homepage, then it's going to be a little bit different now. So if the answer and question is the only thing that you're getting on the search results, and it's really more about branding and brand awareness. But the crazy thing, this is my long-winded thing, sorry. The crazy thing that I find is that with the AI overviews right now, because of course these are all changing, is that you can ask the question here and get a result, and then ask it again and get a completely different result. And then you go, whoa. So, you know, as far as the evolution of the tools and, you know, like it's scraping the data that's available to it. And each of those tools is using their own database as well, right? That's the other thing that I think people tend to not necessarily, like Gemini has its own source of data. Google has its own source of data. ChatGPT has a different one. Like they all have different things that they're searching from. So how do you stay on top of that? You just don't worry about it. Make sure the website works and provides the stuff that your people are looking for. And then like that stuff will trickle out, you know, like it's, if you're getting caught up in this rat race around creating more and more and more, and you're creating content that's the same as everybody else in the same structure and the same, there's nothing unique about it. It's not showcasing your positioning statement, you know, in any way, then it's a wasted effort, you know? So yeah, it's a fascinating time, that's for sure. But I will say we do see from our perspective, managing websites, that if you maintain that user experience as your number one throughout everything that you're doing online, all of this other stuff is just noise.
That makes
So I don't know
sense.
if that's reassuring for anybody. So I have a couple of other questions that we could chit chat about. Unless there's anything here, Catherine, that we didn't chat about.
The only other thing that was suggested about the above the fold was featured snippets at the beginning of a page to provide a solution. That was a suggestion, but no questions other than that.
Okay. Yeah, I think some of that will come down to the structure, like the code structure on the website. So that's not so much about what you think you're putting on there, but what's actually happening beneath the hood. And that's the part that the search engines are looking at. You know, so there's a certain element of the foundation and the framework of the website that's going to make a big difference there. So Waiko, I think you've been on a couple of these sessions before, and I think your questions tend to go into the more technical realm. So I think we'll try to keep it more less jargony, at least for this particular conversation. But if there's anything you want to ask that's like more something that a typical business owner might be able to do with their own website rather than getting into the code, then I think that would be, I'd love to hear it if you have any questions like that. Something I wanted to talk about was we sometimes get questions around the differences between having a one-page website and having multiple pages, but those multiple pages are created specifically for search engine optimization. And so it's super interesting because it kind of ties in with this, you know, this idea of creating more and more and more, because it depends on what your goal is with that. So if you're writing for Google, then yeah, you're going to do a certain thing. If you're writing for a specific human who represents your target client, you're probably going to do something quite different. So I think as time goes on and the search engines reward user experience, I think we're seeing more and more very clear indications that writing for Google is not the point. You can write with Google's quality guidelines, 100%. I would absolutely recommend that. But you're not writing just to go rank #1 for a specific keyword. That's not our goal anymore.
You're absolutely right. I also want to mention, especially for small to medium business owners, there is often the drive or the necessity to be writing the content yourself. And if that's something that you enjoy and that you feel that is delivering what you need out of it, that's fantastic. But if it's not, and it is something that you are struggling with, I would really encourage you to be speaking to a copywriter or a content strategist. And that's not to say this person has to write everything for you, or that you need to be paying them on an ongoing basis to be churning out content for you. But even just having kind of a consultation or those preliminary conversations awesome work around setting up, what is your content strategy? I think I said earlier, there are so many moving pieces in your business. You don't need to be a content expert on top of all of that. So look for those expertise that are out there. They're available from, the smaller scale through to through to, enormous scale. And someone like a content strategist is really going to help you set that framework, help you to understand, what those valuable pieces are, and help to set you on the right track. Even if you are ultimately going to be writing it yourself, if you have those guidelines and that kind of direction, that can be of a huge benefit.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you for that, Beck. That's fantastic. So we're at time. So I'm going to, unless either of you has something urgent that's popped up, or Susan's got another bomb,
Nope.
provided she holds up the prop. There we go.
I don't have a problem.
Yeah. Then I'm going to wrap this up. So I want to just thank everybody for being here. There is an invitation at this point, which is that if today's got you thinking seriously about your website's content or whether it's really doing the job, we're going to be I'm hosting a smaller hands-on session on June 24th, where we'll show some of the ways that we've rebuilt client sites, and in a way that consistently leads to about 5 times more organic traffic, and how that starts with a totally different approach to your website and to your content. So we'll send you a link. It'll be in your inbox, either if you're here live today or through the recording. And otherwise, Beck and Susan, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you. That was a really great conversation.
It was fun.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. It was a good conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm glad. Yeah. And thank you, Lauren and Catherine, and anybody else who's in here still, for joining us live. That was really fun. And the recording will be in your inbox by tomorrow.
Thank you so much, ladies. This was super helpful.
Oh, good.
Fun.
Thanks.
Take care.
Yeah.